Welcome to Inside Coverage, where we break down the how and the why of everything that's happening in the NFL. And I can't imagine what we have to talk about today because we got draft reaction coming in. We've got the team bringing them in. Frank Schwab, Charles Robinson. I'm Jason Fitz. I can't imagine what we're going to be. You know what? C-Rob and I just hung out a few hours ago. I feel like, Frank, I haven't seen you through this whole process. I should note to everybody, we are live. What could go wrong? They're putting us all together live. We're on YouTube. You can give us all your comments, all your thoughts. We'll get to some of those comments as we go through the show, and we're just going to test this thing out live, Frank. So how you feeling about, having to navigate this course with C-Rob and I with no bumpers?
I just wonder who's got the swear button for Charles. Who's in charge of that? Because we need them. We need them to be as on top of this as possible.
Do we get fined?
Love it.
Is there are there SEC fines if we SEC fines if we curse?
Now we're finding out the one thing we should have covered in the production meeting. This should have been the first thing we figured out. But go ahead.
Are we? Seriously. Do I need to?
This is great.
Do I need to worry about this? Because it's going to slip at least once.
I'm going to find out. I'm going to type here in the
programming. Yeah.
We'll ask Stone. Stone's already hanging on by the same. Look, Stone's our producer extraordinaire. If you listen to Inside Coverage all the time, which you should, rate, review, subscribe. Go get it wherever you get your podcast. We're everywhere, right? If you check out Stone, the one thing that is great, Stone deals with this every single week. He has now typed in the doc, don't swear. So there we go, C-Rob. We get the answer. Do not swear. C-Rob's out. He's just leaving the show at this
odds
point.
Are like,
I'll catch you guys later.
Plus 3,000. I can't bet this right now.
Oh man. Okay, let's get into what we're going to get into over the course of this show today, which is winners and losers. Like, losers are going to be, the fines that come in for the language. The winners for this are all of us because we get to hang out together. C-Rob has been doing this with me for the last couple of days. I hope you took the time to hang out and watch some of our live stream reaction. Really proud of the work we did, and there was a lot to break down. But let's be honest, the number one story, even today as we sit, is that finally Shedeur Sanders was drafted. So when you start talking about winners and losers, feels like obvious. Just being fair here, you got to say the way the Shedeur Sanders situation went down was a loser. Now, I'm trying to make sense of this because this is a Browns team that many people thought was going to be interested in Shedeur. So, C-Rob, let's start here. What sense do you have of how we got to the point that Shedeur Sanders was taken in the 5th round by the Browns after Dillon Gabriel?
I think everything that people came out and said about the pre-draft process, the meetings, just how he rubbed teams the wrong way. I truly believe that. And, there's also been reports out there now that, in particular, the Giants, in a meeting with the Giants, he allegedly got up on the board and wasn't fully prepared for an install. And, again, allegedly had kind of an exchange with Brian Daboll where I don't think he was happy. It sounds to me like basically he wasn't fully prepared for it. This is what's being alleged. Brian Daboll wasn't happy with that. And then they it sounded like it got tense. And I can tell you right now, if that's true, and again, it's out there, one of the easiest ways to get teams to pass on you is to not do well in a situation where they're asking you to do an offensive install in front of them and you don't do it well, and then you have a problem with the fact that you were asked to do it, or however you want to spell that out. And I will say this too. There have been years in the past where certain quarterbacks went into meetings. I remember one in particular. There was a very highly drafted quarterback. He was visiting a team that he did not think was going to be able to draft him. And the offensive coordinator and the quarterback's coach were at the front of the classroom and they were doing stuff. And someone who was taking care of that quarterback in the facility started to get text messages from the quarterback asking where he needed to go next. And this individual said, "Aren't you in the middle of your meeting right now?" And he was like, "Yeah." So this guy goes and he looks in and he sees the quarterback on his phone when he's supposed to be paying attention and interacting with the head coach and the offensive coordinator. That left a really, really poor impression. And so things like this happen with anybody in the draft process. Teams are going to end up passing on you. And I know we made a lot about the visceral anonymous comments that got put out there by the NFL Network, but I didn't hear a lot of people saying, "Yeah, that doesn't sound right." Clearly there were some problems in terms of how he carried himself into meetings. And I think that's ultimately what caused the slide. We can talk about how Cleveland ended up taking him in a little bit, but at least in terms of the slide, I do think it was some of the football stuff, limited athletic profile that teams, maybe not all teams liked. But then I think a lot of it was just what, transpired in the lead up to this. Remember, he didn't work out the combine either. And, late pro day, late private workouts. I think he only did one private workout with the Giants. I don't think he did a private workout with any other team. So really rough process. And I would hope in the future, and I'm sure Shedeur learned something from this, but I would hope in the future other quarterbacks look at this very closely and understand what they're going into with the process.
I think that a few things here. This is just, it was so wild. I don't think we're ever going to see a draft fall like this again. Like when we talk about famous draft falls, we're talking about Aaron Rodgers goes to 22 or Warren Sapp goes to 12. We're talking about a guy who slid to the 5th round. Like that's nuts to me. And never before have we had a draft entirely overshadowed by a 5th round pick like that. That's probably never going to happen again. I think the people who need to take the most responsibility for this, other than Shedeur, are the people who prepared him for this process. They went about this whole process like Marvin Harrison last year, like Travis Hunter this year, where, hey, you're going to draft me top 10. I don't need to work out for you. I don't need to go to the Senior Bowl. Well, they completely misread the room. Maybe not having an agent, maybe that hurt him in this process because he needed, because an agent would have told him, no, dude, you're not guaranteed to go into top 10, first round, anything like that. You need to do some of these things. Yeah, we get it. It's a dog and pony show and none of us like it, but you kind of have to do it. And look, there's some control issues here with the NFL that I've talked about before, that they want you to jump through these hoops and they will rip Marvin Harrison anonymously because they don't like it. But at the end of the day, they grit their teeth and draft him anyway. Well, not in this case. I don't know how you feel about this, Charles, but I thought that a part of this, not all, there's many layers to this. So I don't think it's one thing or another. I thought part of this was sending a message to not just Shedeur, but everybody else. Hey, if you don't play by our rules and you're not a Travis Hunter who's just going to go second regardless, we're going to make an example out of you. Like, we're going to make sure that next year when it comes up, we're going to say, hey, look what happened to Shedeur. You don't want to go to the Senior Bowl. You don't want to do private workouts. Well, you're taking a risk there.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, when Fitz and I were on the show last night, and I mentioned that I had called this former GM who had looked at Shedeur in both the 2023 and 2024 college seasons, had scouted him, preparing for eventually when Shedeur comes out, rounding that profile, rounding it out. And he was always very, fairly critical of Shedeur as a prospect. And he had him in like the 2nd, 3rd round, was not super high on him. But then when this unfolded and he fell out of the 3rd round, even this GM was like stunned. Ex-GM was stunned. And he was like, he couldn't believe it. And he said it felt personal. And I think when he says it felt personal, for some teams, it felt personal, and I want to underscore here, it's probably a different amount of layering for different teams. Every team's going to have their own story and reasoning why they continually passed on him, particularly if they needed a quarterback. But yeah, I think by the end of it, there was certainly a tinge of, hey, F around and find out, basically. And that's sort of what unfolded. And
good job, Charles, not using the swear.
That was
I almost did it. I was like, oh man, how do I say this without, I so rarely say F. But one thing I want real quick, you mentioned the agent. That's really important too, not just from a front end advising the process, standpoint, like, hey, let's be prepared for this. This is what's going to happen when you go into these interviews. Let's make sure we have all your whiteboards, stuff down. Here's all these answers. Let's put you through, mock interviews or whatever. I don't know that necessarily would have worked because Shedeur has always been upfront about, hey, I am who I am. Like, I'm not worried about what other people think of me. I'm going to be me. It didn't work out, I think, really well this time. And then on the back end of it, when he starts to fall, a good agent is just beating teams with the phone. Like, hey, you're coming up. What do we got to do? What's your concern? Can we alleviate these concerns right now? Like, you're just wailing on the phone trying to get your guy selected. And so I think not having the agent on the back end really also probably hurt him.
Let me jump in.
One thing real quick, Fitz. If I could just say this. I keep going back to last year when Dion said, hey, I'm going to make sure my guys like Shedeur don't go to these poverty teams in the NFL. Well,
That's another one.
a lot of those teams are probably like, all right, you know what? You don't think we're good enough to draft your son? I guess we're not good enough to draft your son. Like, I just think this process was, and I'm not one of these people who is against the Sanders family, Dion, Shedeur, and Shedeur's never really been in any trouble. I'm based out here in Colorado. I've seen the rise of Colorado football, been very impressed with it. I'm impressed with Shedeur Sanders, how he played on the field. But at some point, if you carry yourself this way, it could come back to bite you. It really can. When you say, I'm going to make sure that none of these terrible teams draft my son, well, like you said, F around and find out. That's kind of what happened here.
Look, I hear all of this. I just think there's one extra layer of blame here that has nothing to do with Shedeur and nothing to do with the NFL and everything to do with, frankly, mock drafts. Like a third round pick falling to the fifth round is still pretty surprising. But we now are in a society where there are so many mocks from so many media members, some of which may or may not be really tied in enough to do this. And what's problematic about it is we're no longer in a society where, hey, we're not asking smart football people to just give us their mock. We're asking all sorts of people to predict what teams are going to do. And so that's where you end up with collective groupthink. And that collective groupthink suddenly says, well, this tackle must not be good because he was being mocked in the 20s by 10 people. Well, when you see Shedeur mocked over and over and over again by people that are smart and people that may be new to all of this, and you see, well, he's got to be top 10 pick over and over and over again. C-Rob can speak to this. The minute somebody came out and said something that was against those mocks, the general community of the way it was received was, you're an idiot. You don't know anything because these mocks say Shedeur is going to be a top 10 pick. Like, we need to look at this year's draft and break apart the mock draft process, what we read, how we read. As a community of fans, we got to stop engaging with all of this and learn from this to figure out how to not let the media influence change the way we perceive some of the draft going in.
All right. I'm going to push back on that a little bit here. Okay. First off, it's one kid. Like, granted, it was horrendous. This was a train wreck. It's one kid. Okay. It's not like this happens every single year where we're just like, and some kid gets completely buried. Right. Number two, he clearly played a part in that process. It wasn't like, oh, he was just clean and everything was so clean, but he was just a fifth rounder.
He didn't play a part in people saying he was a top 5 pick.
He played a part in the process of where he ended up going in the draft. Fitz, there's nobody. Listen, I talked to 10 teams coming into this, and of those 10 teams, almost all of them were stacking him in the first round on the basis of the belief they thought a quarterback needy team was going to take him in the first round. That's teams, that's people in the league that do this for a living, that sit in those meetings, that go sit there with the clicker and go through all the plays, and they're out there at the stadiums, on game day, they're doing the character work, all this different stuff. And those are NFL teams that thought he was going to go in the first. Not that they didn't, hey, what's your grade on him? Well, our grade on him's not a first, but that we're assuming someone's desperate enough that they're going to end up taking him high in this draft. So what are people supposed to do? Okay, Daniel Jeremiah, right? He worked for teams. He knows, I know a multitude of personnel people that I know are sources for Daniel. He listens to them when they tell him things. And when he comes out with a mock draft and he's got Shedeur Sanders in the first round, there's a reason for that. He's not just making it up. So I think if we're going to blame the mocks here, I kind of think that's BS. There's the second time I avoided it, but I want to say the word. I really do. I don't like this because it's not, again, the evaluation was not clean on him. Okay. Like it wasn't, it's not like,
but hey, there's got to be a way for that noise
he was just
to cut
a fifth
through.
Round talent.
The thing of it is now we have
it's
almost like
people kept saying it over and over again.
Yeah, but nobody listened to it. That's my point. Is like, how do you get those voices amplified and stop listening to all that? Like, because how do you amplify correct voices?
Because Fitz, you don't know. Realistically, you're not in the room picking the kid. The teams are. You don't know at the end of the day exactly how it's going to impact those kids. I was on a show with you. I literally had just talked to an executive who was talking about Mike Green out of Marshall and some characters, the character stuff, which you addressed on the show. And he straight up said to me, there's a chance this kid doesn't get drafted. I went on and repeated it on the show, literally as he was getting drafted. And this is an executive. That did happen. It was like literally
That's hilarious.
Funniest, most terrible call ever. But immediately I checked out of the show. I go, I see he's getting drafted. And of course, I'm texting this guy like, dude. And he's like, hey, man, some teams will just take a dice roll. But he reiterated, I'm telling you, he was off a lot of boards.
Okay, so go ahead.
We don't know how teams are going to react to certain pieces of information. We don't know how personally they're going to take it. If somebody comes into a meeting and they feel like that person's wasting their time. And we especially don't know when the experience they had versus the talent, eventually it evens out. Okay, we didn't like him in the first because we didn't like this or we didn't like that. Now he's in the third. Okay, you know what? We'll deal with the mess that we had, and we'll clean it up, and we'll get him in the building, and he'll be in our culture and all. Then it starts to, it eventually evens out, which is how he comes off the board in the 5th round. Granted, late, but someone in the Browns organization looked at him and said, okay, look, at this point, even though our quarterback room is bursting at the seams, let's go ahead and take him because the value is just too much at this point to ignore versus the red flags.
You mentioned bursting at the seams. Dillon Gabriel, who they drafted in the 3rd round, Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and of course still Deshaun Watson. So what does this fit look like when you look at this room with Deshaun and Kenny Pickett, Flacco, Dillon Gabriel, Shedeur Sanders? Frank, like, what is this quarterback like? How do you like this fit with the Browns?
I actually, I'm going to learn from the Falcons stuff last year when we all just were like, oh my goodness, they've lost their minds. And I'm going to say I don't mind what the Browns did here. They know they don't have a quarterback. They know 40-year-old Joe Flacco ain't the quarterback. They probably know Kenny Pickett is just a shot in the dark reclamation project. They even probably know Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round's no sure thing. So why not take another one? It's the most important position in sports, and they're just taking multiple dart throws. Now, if Shedeur ends up being good and being their starter at some point down the road, they're going to look back and say, wow, the Browns wasted a 3rd round pick. But I don't even know if I view it as that anymore. I just view it as the Browns are saying, hey, we're just going to take multiple shots. Maybe Shedeur is that guy that everybody thought for a while would be a top 10 pick.
Frank, they get their quarterback. No one's going to care about any other picks. If Shedeur makes true. It, who's going to care about Gabriel? They're going to go, we got our quarterback.
That's a point.
We don't care.
That's the point,
we
too.
Don't care
yeah.
We don't.
And now I look at Shedeur. Let's look at this in the prism of Shedeur. I'm looking at, like, if Shedeur Sanders is willing to go in and do the work and compete with the limited reps he's going to have with a 4-headed quarterback room, are you really worried about beating out Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, or Dillon Gabriel? Not really. I could see this being a pretty good thing for him at the end of the day. Now, how he got here was not ideal by any means. And there's going to be plenty. Look, the reactions of the Browns war room was maybe telling. Let's put it that way. But if he goes in there, yeah, to say the least, cool. Yeah. If he goes in there and is, wow, that's the Shedeur Sanders we thought for a while might be going 9th in the draft, he can move up pretty quickly, and it's not like the Browns have anybody who's really blocking his path.
Well, and there's the backdrop too. Now they have 2 first-round picks next year in a quarterback draft that is expected to be better. So if they get their hands on, Shedeur, Dillon Gabriel, they get an inside look on Pickett, having Kenny Pickett in their organization. So those are all 3 young guys. I would tend to believe that a year of having them in, playing some games, some preseason games in the passing program through the camps, maybe one of the 3 young guys ends up starting, and you get a real deep look at them. Maybe both of them end up start. Who knows what this could ultimately unfold into? But by the time the draft rolls around in 2026, you're not so invested in a 3rd round pick and a 5th round pick that if you're sitting there and you're going, wow, now we have a quarterback we love, who we absolutely want to take, and we have a pick to take him. It's as long as you solve the quarterback problem, it covers up for everything else. And we were proving that out with Brock Purdy and Trey Lance. Trey Lance was an unmitigated disaster for the San Francisco 49ers. That was 100% saved by taking Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft and him being a quality starting quarterback. It saved that mistake. So anything they do to save the quarterback position in Cleveland is going to cover up for everything else.
Yeah, you don't got to show your work. You just got to get the right answer. That's it.
Exactly.
Period. Do you guys, as we sit right now, believe that Shedeur can be the right answer for the Browns? Like, with all the baggage that now comes with the fact that he slid in the draft, C-Rob, you made a very interesting point on our live stream that I think should be echoed here, that teams as he continued to fall were looking at it and saying, man, is the juice worth the squeeze now? Like, do I want to have to deal with a packed media room to ask questions about my backup quarterback? Well, he ends up going to Cleveland, where there's still going to be that attention, all of these other things. So given the surroundings, given the way it went down, given how Shedeur got to Cleveland, C-Rob, do you believe that this ends up being a good fit for the team and the player?
Well, first and foremost, I think Hard Knocks is probably calling them right now.
Oh, God.
Ooh-wee.
Facts.
Okay. So that's the kind of spotlight this is going to bring. Everyone's going to want to see, everyone, and I mean everyone, is going to want to see how he performs in camp, in the preseason. What does he look like? I mean, it is the fascination around him is going to be unbelievable. And as it has been throughout this entire process, but now it's amped up even more. And as you said, I brought that up yesterday after, talking to other people in the league, where it's like, okay, as this guy falls, the circus around him just keeps growing and growing. And now once we take him, we're sort of undercutting our quarterback, whoever our starting quarterback is. But this is the beauty of it in Cleveland. They're not undercutting anybody. If, let's say, another organization takes him with an okay quarterback, right? Like, so just throw out Frank. Give me a decent middle of the road quarterback. Okay,
Geno Smith.
Okay, wow. Let's say the Raiders take him, and immediately Geno's sitting there, and he's going, okay. Everybody keeps talking about how really my new contract extension is really just a 1-year deal. And now this kid is in Vegas, and everybody, there's just this huge. So if you're Geno Smith, you're going to turn around. You're going to look at the Raiders, and you're going to go, like, how committed? Okay, I know you're committed $37 million to me, but how committed are you to me right now? Yeah. When you bring this in, this is going to be, everybody's going to be talking. I'm going to get, as Geno Smith, I'm going to get asked about it 1,000,000 times. And so I think that is what is a little bit of the beauty in Cleveland. You're not ruffling any feathers. Like Joe Flacco at this point, I'm sure he wants to start, but he's also really happy to be in the league. So it's, what's Kenny Pickett? Kenny Pickett's going to complain? No. I mean, and then you got another rookie, and then Shedeur. I mean, so that to me, him landing in Cleveland for the price tag that he did, with the, the option of still going to get quarterbacks later in 2026. I think it worked out ultimately the way that it did, and worked out well for Cleveland in this scenario, just because of the value that was there.
I'll say this. I would never say any 5th round pick a quarterback is a good bet to work out. They're all very, very low hit rates, right? But I'll say this. This whole draft fall, maybe it does something to Shedeur Sanders, where he's really never, I'm not saying he's never dealt with any adversity in his life, because he does in different ways, right? But he's always kind of been the chosen one, right? Even when going to Jackson State, and his dad's a coach there, and he comes to Colorado, and he's hailed as like, he's going to lift up the program, and he did. He got his number retired, as we've talked about a million times. And he built this like draft room. It says legendary all over it. And he's never dealt with something like this, where the entire NFL just told him, you know what? You're not as good as you think you are. Now, what does that do? There's all of a sudden, you gotta, most people anyway, look at themselves in the mirror and say, okay, that was a wake-up call for me. And maybe now I go about this in a different way. I'm a professional now. So I'm not discounting the chance that Shedeur Sanders kind of takes this to heart and kind of uses it, motivation, to get better, to be more professional. I mean, I think that's fair to say that he needs to be, after all the talk about his interviews and stuff. So we'll see how he reacts to it. I think that's a big part of this. But again, as Charles kind of pointed out, there's nothing stopping him in Cleveland. Like there's no, Kenny Pickett's not a roadblock for you. It's not like they're saying like, oh, you're not going to be given a chance to beat out Kenny Pickett here. He's our guy. No, that's not it. So I think at the end of the day, this turned out for Shedeur Sanders, as far as landing spot goes, as well as it could have. Cleveland's desperate for a quarterback, and he's going to have a chance.
And Frank, it's a horrible way to get to this silver lining, but let's be honest. Like, if he goes off to the Browns at 2, or say they trade up, 25, 26, whatever in the first, if the pressure there for him to hit the ground running and turn the franchise around is immense. I don't think in the 5th the pressure's there. I think Browns fans, and again, I have Browns fans in my family, and I think they're just looking at this like, hey, if it doesn't work out, it was just a 5th. Like, okay, like, all
It's
right,
worth a
I'm much,
shot. It's worth a shot. It's definitely
yeah,
worth a
I
shot.
think it's much easier for them to let go of the pressure of this because of where he fell ultimately in this draft. Like, I think Browns fans are going to look at this and feel fortunate that if it works out, it was all upside. Oh, we got all upside in this. Like, and if it doesn't work out, it's like, all right, well, I guess he should have gone in the fifth, and that's just kind of how it goes. So for Shedeur, at least he doesn't walk through that door immediately with the specter of you're the guy. You're getting us out of the Deshaun Watson mess. Which is what it would have been if he was a first round pick.
I will wrap it by saying that's a really smart point by you, C-Rob, and I think it changes the perception by everybody. Like every time he throws an incompletion or an interception in preseason, if he does that as a fifth-round pick versus doing that as the fifth overall pick, we view it wildly differently. Wildly. Okay, let's get to some of the other winners and losers that we've got across the landscape of the NFL draft. Believe it or not, there was more than just Shedeur Sanders. But also, I love talking about quarterbacks. So, gentlemen, winner or loser on Aaron Rodgers. And we're going to define some of these, but I really want to get your opinion from both of the guys because if we're looking at one of the more interesting stories, we all thought that the Steelers would take a quarterback. They haven't taken a quarterback. No work was done on that. So, Aaron Rodgers, winner or loser, C-Rob, right now as we sit moving forward?
I think you split the difference because you saw the Vikings acquire Sam Howell. So that closes the door in Minnesota. Like that, everybody was waiting. They're like, okay, they haven't added that backup to JJ. As long as they haven't added an experienced backup to JJ, there's still a chance that Rodgers could end up there and JJ could end up being the backup in 2025 if JJ somehow falters in the next couple of weeks. Nope, now they've added that piece. JJ McCarthy has his backup. So Minnesota's off the table for Rodgers. But the upside of it is obviously the Pittsburgh Steelers have not addressed quarterback in a way that should really scare Aaron Rodgers at all. And I've said 100 times, and I'll keep saying it, he's going to be their starting quarterback in 2025. This is the strongest message we could have possibly received. And the second they passed at 21 on a quarterback, I was like, okay, Rodgers, that's it. He's locked. Like, he's great. They don't have a second round pick. They can't get a quarterback at any point that's going to be able to meaningfully walk in off the street and start. And even Rodgers has said, like, hey, I told them where I'm at. They told me where they're at. You know, he even said, I asked them to tell me if they're moving off me, you know, which suggests that he's planning to be there. He's planning to play football. So I think he's a winner in the sense that he's definitely got a team and the pathway is completely clear for him. It just might not have been the absolute best team and roster he could have landed on.
Yeah, I think it's a win for Aaron Rodgers because all doors could have been closed. If the Steelers draft Jaxson Dart, let's say, and the Minnesota Vikings still go ahead with their plan with trade with Sam Howell, then there's no landing spot for Aaron Rodgers anymore, and he might just be stuck. Like, so I think everything the Steelers did was Aaron Rodgers is our quarterback in 2025, and it's going to happen eventually. I don't know how they could be so confident after what we heard from Aaron Rodgers a week ago on the Pat McAfee show, but they're going down this path. I think that's pretty clear. So I think it's a win for Aaron Rodgers to still have a team that is keeping the door open for him.
By the way, they did take Will Howard in the 6th round, so the Steelers got their future quarterback. I just had to say it. I mean, come on. I just had to at least throw out a little love to Will Howard, who got his name called. All right, let's go to a straight-up winner. No question about this. Jaguars ticket office. Like, season ticket sales for the Jags have to be one of the winners as they pull off a trade that had us. I mean, I feel bad for Cam Ward. Like, Cam Ward was the first overall pick, and between Shedeur Sanders and then the fact that, my God, we weren't he was barely being handed a jersey, and suddenly it was like, we've got a trade, and the Jags move up to the 2nd overall pick. So, C-Rob, can we align on draft winner Jags ticket sales?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, you're right about the Cam Ward thing. I feel bad for the guy because it felt like when the draft started, it was like, can we just hurry up and get to the trade? Like, go ahead, come on, give Cam the hat, like, hug, okay, cool, and let's hurry up and get to
move it along, Cam, move it along.
Yeah, no, it's a huge win for their ticket office. I mean, you know, it's a huge promotional point from this, and you can promote him as a defensive player, you can promote him as an offensive player, you can, you know, stick him on every billboard alongside Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, it's definitely going to sell tickets. And like, if you asked me if I could only pick one player in this draft who I'm allowed to watch next season, I would have picked Travis Hunter. And
but Charles, did you like the trade? Did you like the trade? It's hard because
I
here
okay.
I'm the guy who our boss Al Toby still gives me a hard time for talking about the Will Anderson and Houston Texans and saying basically Will Anderson needs to be Von Miller for this to work out. Well, he's kind of looked a little bit like Von Miller, so good for him. But I'm always against when you're giving up on these trade value charts such a surplus. They gave up what
Mhm.
amounted to the 8th overall pick of the draft in extra in surplus. So in
Right.
that, I'm like, man, that's way too much to overpay. But at the same time, I'm like, well, you did get a guy who we all think is a generational dude, so
Right.
maybe that's worth it.
Yeah.
What do you think about it?
So the way I look at it is we've never seen a guy like this before. So if you're going to overpay, if it's going to be a situation where you throw a lot at it, and it was going to take that, by the way. Browns weren't moving off that unless they
Yep,
got
yep, yep.
that extra first round pick. They needed a second round pick.
They got an offer they can't
and
refuse. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And they also had to have a player they really liked at 5, which in Mason Graham they really did. And so from that standpoint, I like what the Browns got in return. I think Mason Graham, even though he's a little undersized for defensive tackle, I think you stick him next to Myles Garrett, and teams are going to have fits
It's going to be
with
sexy.
that defensive front. You got 2 first round picks next year if you're the Browns, and if you still have quarterback problems, those are key assets that you can then use, or you could use them to trade down in 2026 and accrue more picks. So I love it from the standpoint of what the Browns got, but I also love it from the standpoint of the Jaguars just going, we're going to take a swing. Like, and even though we did give up to the 5th pick and another first, I would argue if you're the Jacksonville Jaguars, you're like, maybe he's going to be great on both sides of the ball. Even though everybody says he can't do it, we said he couldn't do it in college, and then he did it in college. So even
and when you give up that much, he's got to play both ways, right? If you don't give up all that to go get Travis Hunter and be like, you're just a receiver, kid, don't worry about defense. You got to play them both ways.
I think it'll be fascinating to see how they do it. I do think they absolutely will play in both ways. And here's my question to you. Let's say he's not a superstar as a wide receiver. Let's say he's not a superstar as a cornerback. But let's say he's a top 15 player at both positions. Let's say he's a top 15 wideout in the league, and he's a top 15 corner in the league. Isn't that unbelievable? Isn't that still absolutely unbelievable that you got 2 top 15 players for your offense and your defense? And that, to me, is reasonable. I think it's reasonable.
That plays into the draft value too, Frank, because you mentioned earlier they gave up the equivalent of the 8th. All right, well, if you gave up essentially, if you gave up this year's first and next year's first, but in the process you got a top 15 player at 2 different positions, that's worth it. Or if you buy some of the love that we've given, where like this guy could be the next Justin Jefferson, I'd ask if the Jags could give up this year's first and next year's first to get Justin Jefferson on a rookie deal, would they not do that? Right. So like, I think in that sense, as much as look, and then the other part of this is things haven't gone all sunshine and roses so far for Trevor Lawrence. Like, while Trevor Lawrence, I'm not like he doesn't eat a lot of the blame. I mean, my God, like you're getting a quarterback. You paid extra things to play with in this situation to give him an opportunity to really excel. So that's why frankly, I don't really care about the value they gave up, because I think they're taking a huge swing at getting something that could be generational. If it's not generational, it'll still be the most interesting circus show that we've seen. Like, it makes the Jags relevant. I like this in a lot of different ways.
Do you remember?
I'll tell you this.
Real quick, Frank, just let me interject here.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting there and I was thinking about, like, have we ever seen an athlete who's told you just can't be everything? You don't get to be everything. It's how it is. You know who it was? When Michael Jordan came into the league, he thought, I can be defensive player of the year. I can be the league's leading scorer. I can hear all these things I can do. And at the time, people were like, can't do that. You don't get to be the best defensive player on the floor and the best offensive player on the floor. That's not how basketball works. And that's what he was. That's how special he was. So if that is the type of talent that he represents, if he's like a Michael Jordan type where we just never saw it coming, like we never thought we could see a guy do it in college, never thought we could see a guy do it in the NFL, and he does that, you give up the world for him. Like, at that point, it doesn't, that benefits Trevor Lawrence. It benefits the front office, the ticket holders, benefits Jacksonville in general. I mean, that is a win that I think you swing for as hard as you possibly can.
I thought you were going to answer instead of Jordan. Bo Jackson. As everybody, baseball season, join an NFL team mid-season and be a running back for them. Come on, like that's
Oh
silly.
yeah,
And then he did it.
that's
Like,
true.
yeah, so
Yeah,
that's the kind of
I
guy.
forgot about
That's the
those.
kind of potential we're talking about, right? Like to do something nobody else has ever done. I will say this: I am mad about one thing. The past few weeks, thinking about the season coming up and writing my previews and all that, Jacksonville was one of those teams on my radar of maybe this is this year's Commanders, where they just take a huge, huge leap. They're not in a tough division. They have a lot of things going for them. New coach, new blood, the kind of new blood in the system. And
Yeah.
now they go out and get Travis Hunter, and everybody's gonna, I think everybody's gonna jump on that bandwagon. I think this Jaguars team could be really good, like good enough to win a division. Let's put it that way, and make the playoffs. I think that Liam Cohen, if he's what we think he is an offensive guy, man, they're going to be really fun to watch. They're going to be really exciting this year.
I'm going to be the stick in the mud on that, Liam. Like I hear Harmon say the same thing a lot about Liam Cohen and why I love all this. I'm sort of in a wait to see it mode for the Jags. That makes me the stick in the mud, though. Jags fans, be celebratory. It doesn't matter. You've got plenty of time to figure it out. Let me move to Joe Burrow. Let me ask you guys, what do we think? Because looking back at the Bengals draft, they go defense with their first 2 picks. They go guard with their 3rd pick. Winner or loser Joe Burrow? Like loser Joe Burrow because he's still going to get beat to death when he dropped back, or winner Joe Burrow because, my God, he finally gets a defense, Frank? Like, where are we going on the Bengals?
It's got to be loser, but they didn't have a whole lot of draft capital coming in either. It's not like they had a ton of extra picks, but I guess you take a swing on Shamar Stewart, who we all know his deal. The measurables are there and the production's not. That's hard to overcome. It's usually when you're not productive in college, you're not going to be more productive in the pros. That's just how it goes. And they did got a couple linebackers, a couple offensive linemen, but I don't look at this draft and say, yep, they fixed their defensive problem. This is a team that is back on track to go to the playoffs. They're kind of just the same team they were last year, unless Stewart's great right away. Possible, who knows? He's got the intangibles to do the tangibles, I guess, the athletic skills to do it. But I didn't love this draft for the Bengals. I don't think they're really in a better spot than they were at the end of last year.
I don't like. I'm with you. I don't like players who get drafted on all these athletic traits and everything, but then you look at the production and you're like, why doesn't the production match all these athletic traits? We see that happen a lot in the draft over the years, and it rarely ever works out well. I think of Barkevius Mingo. Remember him coming out of LSU?
That's a random name.
Oh,
well done.
Man, he was going to be a monster, right? He was going to be a total monster.
You know who did it, though, is Ziggy Ansah. Ziggy Ansah is one of the few guys. He had a good run.
But it's an outlier.
He was kind of a nobody at BYU. You're right. You're totally right.
But it's an outlier, so I'm not a big fan of that. But I will say this: Burrow won before the night started. They kept Jamar Chase and T. Higgins together for him. They paid these guys. So to me, I'm like, he already won coming into the draft. No matter what they do, he's going to win walking into this draft because you're keeping together, bar none for me, the best wide receiver and the best quarterback and 2 wide receiver combo in the NFL. So it's he was fine walking into this, and hopefully he can win again, and they'll work it out with Trey Hendrickson.
I love what you said. No matter what, it was already a win, as long as it's not the month of September. Oh, throwing shade at the Bengals and their slow starts. Let's look next at a
Raiders fan.
Raiders
fan trolling.
Oh man!
Wait. That means I understand suck better than anybody. I understand what it looks like to swim in the sea of suck better than anybody. And in September's.
Really trying to get me to swear on this show.
You know what? You're welcome.
Really, we need to bait him into this.
I mean,
I'm not paying the fine. I'm not paying the fine.
Yeah. No. Stone said he's got it covered. It's fine. He's taking care of all of it. All right. One draft that the gang really liked, the panel really liked on the live stream, especially particular players, the Cowboys. All right. So the Cowboys take a man in Tyler Booker as a guard that's as big as the 3 of us combined. They really like that. One other pick that C-Mac loved, Siobhan Ravel Jr. is a pick. There were some names here. So what do we think? Like Cowboys, winner, loser? C-Rob, what do you think?
So I went into this and I wrote it. I said I will be stunned if it's not a corner or a wide receiver at 12 for the Dallas Cowboys. But then I did add the caveat that, like, hey, when they take the best player available, it usually works out pretty well for them, particularly and almost always when it's an offensive line pick. I had sort of the same feelings that I would say some other Cowboys fans and one particular player, Micah Parsons, had when the pick came in. You're like, okay, gonna do that again. Another first round offensive lineman, like just keep dumping assets into the first round.
3 of the
But
last
then
4 years, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't want to say it's over investing, but if they all hit, then it's great. Um, but I also had Micah Parsons' reaction when Booker started talking, and the things that he said. To see Micah Parsons like react the way that he did, like offensive linemen who can lead, who are kind of dogs like that. Some guys call them dirt bags, like dirt bags who are, but in the greatest way, like guys who just will go out there and beat the living crap out of you and tell you about it and then say to everybody else, come with me. Those guys are worth so much in the NFL, on the NFL level. Like I think of like Jason Peters was one of those guys who was just, that was the way he led, and he wanted to beat the crap out of you, and guys followed him. And if he's that guy, even at the guard spot, I think that's a pretty big win. And I will yield to the Cowboys seeming to always be right for the most part whenever they spend a high asset offensive lineman.
I'm really torn on this because I look at the value they got.
Y'all
look
are in a
at the value they
spicy
got.
mood today. Y'all are in a bad mood. Go ahead, Frank.
It's totally fine. Like all these players are good, but Booker's a good player. The second round pick whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce on a live show. Let me hear.
Ezaraku. I got you on Ezaraku. Yeah.
He was considered by some to be a first round pick. So was Revelle, their third round cornerback. Some had him as a first round talent. So you got good value, but I'm just sitting here wondering, where's the juice in your offense? Yeah, CeeDee Lamb's awesome. Who else do you have? They are so thin at the playmaking positions. They have two kind of, I hate to say it, kind of cook veterans as their running backs 1 and 2 right now, Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders. Who's their receiver 2? Who are the playmakers for the Dallas Cowboys right now? I came into this draft thinking, okay, they're going to get maybe a Matthew Golden or somebody, the Tyler Warren or whatever they're going to do, or even second round to get a running back or something like that. They didn't address that at all. And I do wonder if that's going to catch up to them. It's great that they have this really strong offensive line and they got a couple of really good defensive players. And it's hard to, in a vacuum, criticize them for that. But who's making plays for the Dallas Cowboys offense? They are absolute. They might be the worst, if it wasn't, especially if it wasn't for CeeDee Lamb. But even with CeeDee Lamb, they might have the worst set of skill position players in the NFL right now. And that's not a great way to live.
There's a space, though, Frank, after the draft, where once teams reassess their talent pool, and by the way, the players who were available going into the draft usually end up being available coming out of the draft. There are some wideouts, I think, that are available out there. It just depends on how much salary or risk are they willing to take on. I think, look, if they made a strong run at George Pickens, do I think they could get him? I think they probably could. If they really made a strong run at him, I think, Brandon Ayuk. I think, there's a number of wideouts that coming into this draft you could have chased after. And I still go back to Jerry talking about deals, right? Trades. He made it sound like they had a couple cooking that were pretty important. Maybe those were for veterans and they just got set off to the side until after the draft because they wanted to see ultimately how it shook out. I tend to believe it would have had to involve draft assets this year. So maybe they're completely off the table. But I do think there's a space after this to address some of those other areas of need.
As we sit right now, by the way, the Dallas Cowboys still have not addressed the wide receiver position at all in this year's draft. So certainly that must point to what C-Rob's talking about. And I guess I'm just more positive than you guys are on it. Just a little bit, but, we got more to get to. All right, so let's take a look next. Winner. I'm just going to call this one. I'm going to call this one, see if you guys agree with me. Winner, Drake Maye. All right, so you were just talking about offensive linemen that fire people up. I don't know if you saw Will Campbell standing on stage saying he's going to die for him, like he's ready to die for his quarterback. And then you get Travion Henderson. You get Kyle Williams, a wide receiver that a lot of people like. You also get a center. Like you're addressing everything. Like I just feel like Mike Vrabel came in and was like that year off he spent, he was getting fired up to just hit home run after home run after home run. This was a good draft for Drake Maye in my mind, C-Rob.
I think it was a good draft for the Patriots overall, really, realistically. Yeah. And here's the thing about Campbell. I initially, how we did the little emojis. I did the kind of wincing emoji for him because of the fact that I do think the arm length stuff matters and all that. And I know people say, hey, we didn't see it on tape. It wasn't prevalent on tape and readily obvious that he was having, significant problems with longer arm players leading into this draft. But when I heard him talk, as you said, he made those comments about what he's willing to do and riding for Drake Maye. I was like, okay, he's got the mentality I want. That's for sure. So if he turns out to be great at left tackle, awesome. If he turns out to be pretty adequate, awesome. If he turns out to be great at guard, if you move him inside, that's great. So I was like, I just stared at their draft. I'm like, what starters did they get ultimately in this draft? I think Campbell's a starter. Travion Henderson, huge, big play profile, speed. And by the way, he's great in pass protection, which is a way you help your offensive line to keep a running back on the field who can block for you. Think like Zeke Elliott in pass protection. That's how good he is in pass pro at the running back spot. So you're really enhancing not only the big play explosion aspect, but you're helping your offensive line. I think Kyle Williams, another explosive guy, wide receiver, big speed, huge downfield threat for them, is going to be a starter, I believe. Jared Wilson, the best center in the draft, I would argue. And so I'm like, okay, you got 2 offensive line starters. You got a running back who can block and make huge plays for you. And you got a wide receiver who's a deep threat, explosive type of guy. And then when you get further in the draft, one name that popped up to me that I thought was interesting, they took that LSU edge, Braden Swinson. Swinson, like when I talked to those 10 teams and I said, where do you see where the edges come off or whatever? Swinson was a guy who I think 8 of the 10 said was a 3rd round pick, and they got him in the 5th, and they need an edge. And, and I think teams believe he can develop into a solid starter at the edge position. So if you're getting a starting edge, 2 offensive tackles who can start for you, and 2 explosive pieces, skill position pieces on offense, it's ungodly draft for you. Now let's see if they actually pull it off. I kind of liked their draft last year and it was horrible. So
yeah. The Kyle Williams pick leads you to believe that Polk isn't Law Patriot depth chart, right? Like, stuff like
Javon
that.
Baker, probably not.
Yeah. 4 top 100 picks on the offense. That's awesome. And with the Will Campbell thing and the arms, that is a thing, right? But at the same time, I'm like, this dude played at LSU. You're playing against basically NFL talent already. And he was awesome from his first day as a freshman on. So I don't think Will Campbell's going to have any problems. I really like how the Patriots went about their whole offseason. They spent a ton of money on defense, and then they used the draft for offense. That's kind of the way you do it. They needed to fill so many holes, and somehow they filled a bunch of them. First through the cap space, second through the draft capital. Yeah, the Patriots, who needed an infusion of talent more than any other team in the NFL, probably got a lot of guys who are going to be on the field making a big impact week one on.
I have a T-shirt in my house that says T-Rex hates pinatas, and he's trying to get his tiny arms. That's all I think about now every time with Will Campbell. The way we talk about him, it is just a massive, massive human being that would pick me up with one hand and just throw me across the room, and I'm out here just T-Rexing him. All right, Giants, winner or loser? Think about this. I mean, they get Abdul Carter. They obviously add to their defensive line across the board, and they trade up not a ton to get back into the first round to get Jaxson Dart. So all of that being said, I feel really good about it, but also I'm not sure that they have the regime in place that's going to be around long enough to even develop any of this. So C-Rob, where are you on the Giants, winners or losers?
Okay. Carter, look, I think Carter, if Carter is what he's cracked up to be, and I think if they can figure out a way to have a speed package where you're they're exercised the 5th-year option on Kayvon Thibodeau. You've obviously got Brian Burns. If they have a speed package worked out where they get all 3 of those guys on the field, and I mean, the upside to me, I remember watching the speed package of the New York Giants beat an undefeated Patriots team, just club them in the Super Bowl. And so that my mind kind of goes back to that. Wow, if that's what you're going to do up front, and again, you got Dexter Lawrence as well. I mean, it's scary. So yeah, if he's a superstar, I really love it. Dart, we'll see with Dart. I mean, I will say what he does on the field, the aspects of his game, it's good that he's with Brian Daboll, right? Because the Ole Miss offense it's a little wonky, right? It's not always a great 1-to-1, comparison to an NFL offense. I don't know on Dart. I mean, ultimately we'll figure that out. The one pick that I think was really interesting. I don't know why. I know he's slow, but I kind of like Cam Scatterbo, and they
I do
took him
too.
Yeah.
in the fourth
Yeah.
round. And I'm like, I don't know. I watched him in the college football playoffs. He looked pretty good against some NFL talent, and I'm like,
Yeah, I was
what are we
gonna.
doing
Not
here?
like. Yeah, he looked
So I'm
fast
like,
enough against all those dudes Texas has, right?
yeah. So I think they've kind of got a 1-2 punch now at running back, and they didn't onboard a lot of assets, but I feel like they onboarded some guys that if they hit, there's some superstar picks. Like, Abdul Carter could be a superstar. I don't think the quarterback has to be a superstar in Jaxson Dart, but if he's at least good, that is obviously a huge win for that organization.
I didn't love the Giants draft. Carter's obvious. Like, he had to pick him. Just Dart, it leaves me like, I don't know. Like you said, he kind of came from that wonky Ole Miss offense. So there's a lot of projection. You got to say, this is how he's going to look in an NFL offense. And maybe Daboll can get him there. And maybe that saves Brian Daboll's job. Like, by the end of the year, if you could sell hope to the Maras.
Frank,
but
let me ask you
it's
this.
a gamble.
Don't you think you took a quarterback at the end of the first round who's not going to start for you? At least that's certainly not the plan, is for him to start the 2025 season, at least at the very beginning, right? Don't you think they had to have been told by ownership, hey, all this stuff in the media that, hey, you're on the hot seat and your job's on the line in 2025. Let's go ahead and put that on the back burner and not worry about it. Go do what's right for our team.
Yeah.
And don't worry about whether or not you're going to get fired after 2025. I'm going to be patient here. Just make the right picks. I have to believe for them to draft the quarterback, unless the owner just straight up said, draft the quarterback, go get the quarterback.
Well, the
even
other
if
part
that's
of
the
this,
case, though, C-Rob, like, even if that's the case, I still think weirdly that could be a win for this regime, because when you draft a young quarterback, wins and losses are no longer as important as development of that quarterback. So in my mind, let's say this all goes off the rails. Russ only makes it a few games in, and suddenly they realize it's absolutely a terrible season. Jaxson Dart is in. Well, if you're Brian Daboll, you're now not coaching just for wins to save your job. I believe your coach. Like, if we see this huge improvement of Jaxson Dart over the course of the year, it's like, no, this is a relationship that really works. That's another way to justify your employment. So I think there's still a win for the Giants in that, weirdly.
That's a good point.
And I think that's where I was kind of coming from. I get what you mean by saying that you feel pretty confident you're going to be here next year if you draft a quarterback who's not expected to do anything. But I also look at it from those two guys, GM, Joe Schoen, and obviously Brian Daboll. They knew that if you get to the end of a 5-12 season with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston as your quarterbacks, what do you sell? What do you sell the Maras? I'm bringing you back. Now it's like, hey, did you see those last 4 games Jaxson Dart started? He looked pretty good, didn't he? We're developing him. We got something cooking. You don't want to change course now. Like, I could see there being a path there. The Giants know they're going to finish in last place in the NFC East, right? Like, that's probably going to happen. But at least you have to sell something at the end of the year to get another year. And that might be the hope of, hey, Jaxson Dart looked pretty good by the end of the year. And let's keep that going with him.
Look, I'm over here throwing confetti for all of these drafts so far. Can we all agree on the Bears? Can we call the Bears winners?
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, Ben Johnson goes out, gets toys to play with for Caleb. Like, the Bears are winners, right, Frank? Like, give me this.
Oh, man. I'll say this. If Caleb Williams doesn't have a pretty good second season, and I mean, I'm talking about a pretty big step forward, I think there should be alarms going off because he has everything. He has everything he needs right now. He has an offensive line. He has skill position talent. Like, they just said, he is a coach, obviously. They said, here you go, Caleb. Make it happen. And you can't take a step back if you're Caleb Williams now. And I don't think he will. I think he's going to be fantastic in his second year. My only question, I guess, is how high can the Bears go in this division? Like, the division's a beast. We know that. Like, there's 3 teams that combined for about 38, 39 wins last year. Like, it was an amazing, amazing year for the NFC North. So maybe the Bears are still the worst, the best last place team in NFL history. Like, I don't know where they're going to slot in, but I do know they're going to be fun to watch. And they have given Caleb Williams every opportunity to succeed now.
Man, I'll say this. Ben Johnson knows the assignment in the NFC North. It's you got a drag race to win in the NFC North. Like, have a good defense. That's important. But you got to score a heck of a lot of points in the NFC North. And I sit there and I'm like, man, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, Colston Loveland, Who else? Oh,
Roma Dunze.
Roma Dunze. Like you
Yeah,
saw,
Luther Burden's
like,
your number 3. Like,
well,
I don't
here's the
know
thing
what I
about
think
Burden,
about
Frank.
Luther Burden, but as a 3, oh yeah, sign me up for that.
I don't know what I think either, but I will say this: when I talk to anybody about Burden in the pre-draft process, even the people who didn't like him were like, if he gets with the right offensive coordinator, like who really knows how to use him, he's and so when the Bears drafted him, I was like, oh my God, like great, like good for him, awesome. Because if there's something to get out of him, in terms of like bending the scheme in a certain way that takes advantage of his talent, which is like a yak guy, get the ball in his hands and let him do damage. Ben Johnson, I think, is absolutely going to understand that. So, I was the first 2 picks alone because I like Colston Loveland a lot. I do too. Michigan's quarterback position was just atrocious last year, and I think, I think people did not understand how bad that really. How depressed his numbers really were. I mean, I think if he had been in an offense with a high flying quarterback, he would have put up, monster numbers. So, and then him being put in that offense and surrounded by all those other weapons, I almost wonder, like, are there going to be enough balls to go around? Because you just like, there's a lot of guys who are going to want catches and touches in that offense, and but it's a great problem to have for them. Definitely champagne problems to rebuild the offensive line the way that they did and amp up the volume on the skill positions. At the very least, I'm like, well, they should be able to score with a lot of teams in the NFC North. I don't know if they'll be able to win a lot of games yet, but they should be able to score a heck of a lot of points.
I think Frank and I have said this a million times working together for the last couple of years. Like, I'm such a fan of having a clear set identity of who a team is. And we knew what the identity of Ben Johnson's offense was going to be. I just thought that this was a great draft to go out and really assign that and assert that. So that was a great thing. I was sitting, I don't know, a foot away from Charles McDonald on the couch during our live stream. I didn't feel like C-Mac really wanted me to reach out and hug him, so I didn't. But some would say maybe the Falcons belong on the loser board of this one, which I'm only saying now because C-Mac's not close enough to me to lash out. Like, the Falcons make a massive trade back up, and that's what I think just has everybody shocked. Like, they traded back up to 26 to take James Pearce Jr. They took 2 edge rushers in the first round. We know they needed edge rushers, but guys, they gave up a first-round pick last year, and even after our live stream, Tice and McDonald were still talking about just the wildness of that move. So, C-Rob, are we good calling the Falcons a loser?
I think it depends on what you can ultimately get out of Pearce, because I think if Pearce, there's a lot to like there, and then there's a lot of like, okay, maybe some character stuff. Is he always have his head screwed on straight? Are you getting 100% out of him all the time? But James Pearce was also a player that prior to last year's college football season, when I was talking to different evaluators, I'm like, hey, who should I be keeping an eye on in terms of potential first overall pick in this draft? Pearce's name came up a couple of times as a player that, a lot of people really like the skill set. There was just a bunch of other stuff that you kind of had to deal with. I think what's interesting here for the Falcons is the why that ended up going down with Pearce. He was going to be their pick at 15. If Jalen Walker wasn't there, I think Pearce was their draft pick at 15th overall. So they thought, we walked into one guy coming out of the Georgia program who we love and we didn't think would be here. And hey, we went and got the other guy that we would have taken at 15 anyway. It's a team I would have liked to have seen a lot more assets added to it. And you know what, you're going to ultimately get probably 5 picks this year, and 4 of those are defensive. I don't like it just because I think it's short on overall talent. I think it is a team that still needs an abundance of talent, but I do think that if you got 2 edges that you truly believe are going to be high level guys, no one's going to care that you gave up a future first round pick as long as those guys deliver sacks.
Yeah, and I might be the only person who's really okay with all this. Like, yeah, they overpaid, and I don't like that. But we've been saying year after year after year, when are the Falcons going to fix their pass rush? When are the Falcons going to fix their pass rush? And they did it in a big time way. Jalen Walker at 15, I thought, was one of the better picks of the draft. Like, that was a steal, I thought, for them. And then, okay, I mean, yeah, James Pearce has to be that dude. Like, he's got to be worth it. But obviously the Falcons really, really believe in him and his talent, and there's reasons to believe in it. So we go from the Falcons pass rush is absolutely holding them back to the Falcons drafted 2 pass rushers in the first round. Like, that's pretty impressive to me. I get it cost them a lot to do it, but I honestly don't hate it. I as long as, look, it all depends on if these guys pan out. But if Pearce is what he can hit his ceiling, I actually like this. It kind of transforms the Falcons defense.
Summarizing a little of the late night conversation that we were all having post draft, the only thought that I would say, guys, is that now you've changed what your opportunity cost is next year, depending on what the outcome is for Michael Penix Jr. If Michael Penix Jr. is great, none of this matters. You're right. If Michael Penix
Right.
Jr. is just okay and needs more weapons, you just made it much harder to get those in the draft next year.
True.
If Michael
That's true.
Penix Jr. turns out to be an absolute disaster, which none of us think are going to happen, but we have very small amount of proof here. If that turns out, now you're in a really curious situation where you can't really help anything offensively next year. That's the variable of cost. But to both your points, sacks matter. And if they get a bunch of sacks and everything breaks right for the Falcons, nobody will care. Let me get one more in here. Jalen Milroe, winner or loser. Jalen Milroe specifically falling to the Seattle Seahawks and then knowing that we all thought that I won't say falling, being drafted by the Seattle Seahawks. So he goes to Clint Kubiak's offense. And we all know that the way to get something special out of Jalen Milroe is going somewhere that will slowly develop him and help him become a passer. C-Rob, Jalen Milroe in this situation, winner or loser?
I love him going to Clint Kubiak. I definitely love him going to Clint Kubiak. What I don't love is, like, how long is Clint Kubiak going to be there? Like, is he going to be gone? Like, he's on head coaching lists. So it's like, you know, how much development is Milroe ultimately going to get? If he gets a couple years with Clint Kubiak, that's going to be fantastic. I hope that Sam Darnold is good enough to keep Milroe, you know, people from wanting to cry out for Milroe. That said, I guarantee he's going to be on the field in 2025 in running packages. There's no doubt in my mind, because it's too high level an asset right now. And why would you squander it by not using it immediately? So I don't know if it's going to be like a Taysom Hill, like on steroids, you know, package where you just got a guy who's, yeah, kind of. I mean, but his running ability is so unbelievably elite. And I think if you're Clint Kubiak, you're like, we just got to use him as a weapon now, and we'll work, you know, with the intermediate passing game. We'll refine that over time. It was just good to see him land in the hands of someone who definitely knows what they're doing when it comes to the quarterback position, and then also have a starter in front of him who, for all intents and purposes, as long as he doesn't fall off a cliff, Darnold should be able to make Milroe's life easier by, you know, not being the Jets Sam Darnold or the Panthers Sam Darnold, and everybody's all of a sudden saying, get the Alabama kid in there.
Yeah, I thought it was a perfect pick, because when you're thinking about Jalen Milroe, it's like, he's got to go to a team that's going to be patient. Well, he goes to a team that they're not looking to replace Sam Darnold, but yet Sam Darnold's contract is such that in a couple of years, you might be thinking about the next guy. That Jalen Milroe should kind of be ready by then. And like you said, the Seahawks can still use him in different packages in the meantime, like get him on the field, have him make an impact. But I think your return on investment for the 92nd overall pick could be really, really good if Jalen Milroe puts into work, develops his game, gets better at some of the aspects he needs to get better at, because the skill set's all there. He has as much physical skill as anybody in this draft as far as quarterbacks go. And so I really like this. But I like the Seahawks draft overall. Like Zabel in the first round really adds to their offensive line. Eamon Worry is a safety in the second round. He's going to be really good for their defense. The tight end Arroyo out of Miami. I like a lot of the picks they made, but especially like the Milroe pick. It was very smart to say, this is an investment for the future. It's going to pay off for us at some point.
They add athletes, man. I will say that. Like, that is, I was like, man, they love athletes. Like, these are super high level athletes. Let me ask you something real quick, because I wondered this. Knowing what Sean Payton was able to get out of Taysom Hill, right? And if you looked at that kind of a player, knowing the production, the different positions he could play, what he brought to your team, if you could take that player and go, I'll give you this guy, but he's a much better runner and he's a better passer too, and has a better arm, what would you spend on that guy? I was kind of confused. I was still surprised he went at the end of the third, because I'm like, just sheerly as a weapon alone. And like, let's say you're staring at him and you're going, we can get him 10, you know, offensive snaps, and we think he's going to do some serious damage with those 10 snaps. Isn't that worth more than the end of the third round?
Yeah, I agree with you. It's not like a Jordan Love situation where Jordan Love's just sitting on a bench for 3 years. Like,
not at all.
This is a guy who can give he can give you some juice right away. And so I agree with you. He should have gone higher than 92nd. I definitely
look. I was sitting on the couch the whole time in that third round, closer and closer we got. I was thinking, man, just give this guy to Chip Kelly. Like, I just would have loved to have seen, like, as a fan
Yeah.
of the team, I would have loved to have seen. Speaking of which, what do you know? We ran out of time before the guys could tell you why the Raiders had the best draft they've ever seen in the history of all football. Let me live, people. Let me live. Thanks for hanging out with us, everybody that's been watching. We appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube. You see it everywhere right there. We couldn't do this without everybody behind the scenes. Love coming live to you. This has been a lot of fun, and you're going to see more and more of this. Make sure you're checking out Inside Coverage wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you're hanging out with us on social media at Yahoo Schwab, at Charles Robinson, at Jason Fitz. Most importantly, no matter what anybody says, no matter what grade anybody gives your favorite team, don't worry about it. At the end of the day, your favorite team is going to have the chance to prove everybody right or wrong in the next couple of years. So today, for the weekend, until we actually hit games this fall, celebrate. Well, because for all we know, take the poly positive out of this. Thing could be absolutely epic. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with us.